Right. So we don't really know.
Yeah, it says.
Is
See, it
this
says
live right now or is it?
it says it is.
It says it
There's
is.
a red live thing, so I
Nice.
will trust. I should have it open on another browser or something, but I don't
Cool.
want to bog the internet down. So normally I was thinking about this today too. I do like a welcome to thing, but I'm not going to do that because I'll just do
Right.
it in post for the podcast. And
Gotcha.
yeah, this is thanks for hanging out. I mean, I really
Pleasure,
appreciate it.
man. It's great to see you. It's great to chat.
Yeah, we've been hanging out in that the text chat for the
Oh my
last
God.
couple of months, and
It's so entertaining.
yeah, to say the least. I being the younger, more inexperienced kind of player, it's fun to see you guys do your thing. For anybody that's watching, it's Pat Stewart and Flavio Cirillo and Ashwin and I. And we're just
Drum thread ridiculous.
oh my god, yeah. I I don't think we haven't talked about anything. Any drums players. Check this clip out.
Yep.
You know,
That's signature.
yeah, yeah. Oh my
That's
god,
Henry.
yeah. Is John Henry? Yeah. Oh man,
That's
that
funny.
it's really cool though. It's cool to listen to you guys talk about what you've done over the years, particularly Pat and yourself.
Right.
Pretty pretty iconic.
Pat Stewart is the icon, man.
Yeah, he
Pat's like
is.
he's such a lovely human being too.
Yes.
We haven't hung out that much, but when we do chat, when we do see each other, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well,
And
that's good.
yeah, I mean his legacy of playing. It's just like, well, turn on the radio, you know.
Yeah.
Boom,
Well,
there's Pat.
no kidding. So you guys, how's the drum community in Vancouver? Is it kind of
Um, I sort of feel like you have to. There. I spent so much time on the road that I
hmm
never really got involved in the Vancouver drum community, just because I was never here.
right?
So I always felt a little bit like I was on the outside, just because I was never around. But I try to connect with people who are playing in town, people who are working in the studios. I mean, there is a community here. I think it's really small.
hmm
Um, but connecting with guys like Pat and Flav, who are here and they're working, and I connect with Randall Stahl, and so I sort of try my best. Life takes you in different directions. I have children also, so
Right.
you just get caught up in different things of life. But I do try and go. I mean, when we could go to see live music, I was out
Oh, good.
all the time. I love, I miss it so much,
Yeah. Don't we all?
as everybody does.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
I have a daughter, India. She's in her first year of university at UVic.
Wow.
And then I have my second daughter, Taja. She's in grade 8. So two girls. We have, I should say, we have.
hmm
And they're, yeah, it's fantastic. Do
That's
you have any
awesome.
kids?
No.
No kids.
No. Not yet. No. It's
Go.
yeah.
Get
Yeah.
on it.
I hear that from
Build the
from
children, man.
oh man. Yeah. I mean that's exciting.
You have
You know
lots
we
of time. You have lots of time.
we do, and thankfully, we both can afford to. I
Yeah.
think
Well, that's something to think about.
yeah, it's a stressor for sure.
Yeah. Having kids
Um,
is expensive.
yeah,
It just
yeah,
is. And
and
it involves, it involves, there's a different responsibility that your life takes on when you decide to have children.
that's right. Yeah, a little shuffling of priorities
Yeah.
and what's
We
important.
toured for 25 years. There was no
Right.
children then. So it was easy,
That's right.
right? It was easy. We didn't have any other responsibilities other than to make music.
Right.
And then along come kids, and it changes there's no such thing as just going on tour whenever you want. It's like, oh no, we have a little more. And we took our youngest on tour, on the Afterglow tour.
Okay.
We dragged our youngest, India. She would have been 3, 4. We dragged her around the world for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, it
That
it takes its toll.
yeah, yeah. How did that how did that affect her I don't know, upbringing isn't the right word, but you know, her kind of like social.
Yeah, she's always been a nomad. You know,
Okay.
she loved it. You know, she
Yeah.
loved it. It's that sort of stress of being a parent that, oh, making sure they eat well, making sure they sleep well. You know, you're traveling in different time zones. You're in a plane. You're in a tour bus. I remember the first time we flew to Australia from Vancouver. I was freaking thinking, oh my God, if she doesn't sleep, she's going to keep everyone awake. This is going to be the worst thing ever. And she slept for 12 hours.
Oh man.
I was awake the entire time watching her, making sure she's okay. Um, my wife, Sarah, at the time, she slept the entire flight. I did not.
Oh no.
But yeah, but that was sort of like, oh, she's a great traveler. And so and it was one of those things where we better get them used to this life because this is what your parents do for a living. They sometimes travel a ton.
Right.
And we don't want, you know, we want to include our children in our lives and our experiences.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then Sarah, when she continued to tour after that, when we had 2 kids, and she to this day has taken our kids on tour all the time.
That's cool.
And they love it.
Oh, I bet.
It's
I mean,
it's like summer camp.
it's so it's so unique. Like how, I mean, yeah, kind of cliche, but how often can you say that your parents are rock stars? And you know,
Yeah, but I think it's also important to just that they see what your parents do for the living because they don't really get it sometimes.
right?
You know, they don't really. I mean, they do now. They get what their mom does, but they could kind of care less.
Right.
Which is fine. They should care less. So yeah, this is what your parents do for a living. This is not normal. This is Disneyland.
Right.
And when we get back home, life is normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so cool. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So, so we gotta go back. I need to hear about,
Yeah.
you know, where you come from and that
course.
kind of thing. So, Sarah kind of exploded in the early 90s.
Correct.
Before that,
Yeah.
what were you up to?
So I grew up in Calgary,
Mm-hmm.
finished high school, off to PIT.
Right.
You know, I would buy Modern Drummer magazine and see those ads. I'm like, this is where I want to go. Not really having any idea what PIT was.
Right.
I just knew I need to move to California to, you know, that I think there's that first, I want to be a rock star. You don't have a clue what that means, right? You don't have a clue what that means. You want to make music, you want to be a rock star, but you don't really know what that means.
Right.
So anyway, I moved to California right after high school and went straight into PIT.
Okay.
Or as I say, PIT. I keep it quiet.
Yeah.
And I was in LA for 4 years.
Okay.
So I did the summer session, then I did the full year, and then I did the voice program for a summer session and a full year.
Okay.
Because I've always loved to sing. And I always thought, well, if you're a drummer and you can sing, you're probably going to get a lot more work.
Yes.
And so I really worked on that sort of coordination thing of being able to sing and play. And it's effortless for me because I worked on it for a long time. And I love singing. And I've just always thought, oh, if you're singing, if you play an instrument and you sing, you're going to work more.
Right.
Right. And it's a lot of fun to sing backups when you're on stage. It's just, I love doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So did the PIT thing. And then I legally couldn't work because I was on a student visa.
Okay.
And sort of immigration was kind of coming down hard when they would catch people working in, you know, whether you were working in the States and you weren't supposed to be or working in Canada, immigration would come down hard on you. And a couple of drummers I knew got sort of caught. And so for a number of years, when they got back to Canada, they weren't technically allowed to go back to the US. I think it's changed now. I don't think it's as strict, but it definitely scared me. I'm like, oh God, I better not even think about working down here in the US because I don't want it to, you know, ruin my chances of ever coming back here, you know, to work.
Right.
So then it was time to move back to Canada and kind of, you know, get the career started. So my sister lives here in Vancouver. She's an actress. I didn't want to move back to Calgary. Toronto, I didn't really know much about it, or I sort of have a little more affinity to the mountains and the ocean.
Okay.
So my sister was like, you should move to Vancouver here. There's a lot of work here. There's a lot of music. So I was like, okay, it's time to move back to Vancouver.
Okay.
So I came here with my little promo pack and my 8x10 and my cassette tape, of my playing styles, which is so funny because I didn't have any experience because I just came out of school.
Right.
So my resume was basically school and, maybe the high school rock band back in Calgary. But I had my little promo pack and I took it around town and I dropped it at all the music management companies and the record labels when the record labels had offices here.
Right.
And I started playing a little bit around town, finding gigs. And then I got called by Network Productions, who were a management company and a record label. And they had a band called Lava Hay, which was two girls, Suzanne and Michelle, singer-songwriters, very folksy. They both had blonde hair. They looked like twin sisters.
Okay.
They had made a record and they were auditioning drummers. So, I'm this fresh from California, affected punk with my surf shorts, my Porcaro rimmed glasses.
Right.
Because I had to have the horn rimmed glasses like Jeff.
You have to.
Because I worshipped Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to hang with Jeff and I studied with his dad. And so I went into this audition here in Vancouver, and pretty much every sort of working, busy drummer who lived in Vancouver, a lot of them had auditioned for this gig.
Okay.
So I'm this punk, freshly moved here from, California 2 months earlier. I come in and I audition, and I can tell by the vibe in the room, I'm dressed very differently than all these hippies in this room. But boy, did I nail the music.
It's all that matters.
But there was a bit of a callback, a couple of callbacks, and nobody wanted to hire me because, not that I had a bad personality, I had a different personality.
Okay.
Than these guys. They were a little more hippy dippy. I'm this affected punk from California.
Right.
Who dresses differently, who looks differently, who talks differently. But the keyboard player sort of went to bat for me. He's like, we need to get this guy. He's got the playing that is perfect for this. He may not look the part, but we'll work on that.
Right.
And so when I, and the funny thing is after the third or fourth callback, they sent me home and they gave me a bottle of wine. They said, thank you for coming. And I left basically going, oh my God, I didn't get the gig. And I was walking down this alley and I smashed the bottle of wine against the wall. I was so pissed off. And then when I got home, there was a message on my phone from them saying, we would really like you to join our band. So I just felt like oh, Jesus.
How do you know, though?
You don't know. So that's kind of, and joined their band. They'd finished a record on Network, and off we went on tour for a year.
Wow.
So that was my sort of first my first experience thrown into touring. I think I was making $325 a week.
So that's,
I was like, oh, if I add this up, that 4 weeks, that covers my rent. Okay, this is a job. I'm going to get paid play. So that was my first experience, sort of, joining a band, going on tour.
Amazing. So that kind of audition process, do you hear that happening very often anymore around Vancouver or Toronto or even LA, or is it more word of mouth kind of thing these days?
Yeah, I think these days it's probably more word of mouth. I mean, when my two auditions were one for Lava Hay and one for Jason Mraz in LA. And that was not a cattle call, but again, a bunch of people were called, go down to center staging, all very sort of high end. I was like, man, I haven't auditioned for anything in 25 years. I better take this seriously. I don't know how, I think it's more word of mouth these days. It's, a musical director will get hired and he'll put together a band and the artist kind of lets them put together the band.
Right.
And I think those situations, it's more about the personality. It's not so much the playing. It's like, yeah, we know you can play, but touring is 2 hours on stage and 22 hours the rest of the day, where you really need to be able to assimilate and hang with people.
Yeah. Right.
So, Yeah, I don't know if the sort of the audition cattle call thing happens anymore. Maybe it does.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, living in Edmonton, there's not much for,
Right.
um, big touring gigs.
Sure.
So yeah, just
Word of
curious,
mouth.
really.
Word of
Yeah,
mouth.
it has to be, and the gigs that I have had that are, more national, playing in Ontario, playing in BC
Yeah,
and stuff. It is word of mouth,
of
100%.
course.
That's it.
Yeah.
So Lava Hay, then what happened after that?
So after Lava Hay, I started. I was there was an artist named May Moore who was on Sony Canada,
Okay.
and she had made a record, Barney Bentall, and Barney Bentall had produced it. Barney Bentall and his guitar player, and she's very sort of singer songwriter, great acoustic guitar player. And the Lava Hay thing was kind of coming sort of to an end, the touring, and it was like, okay, got to look for another gig.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was finishing her record here in Vancouver, and it was I got called to do a percussion overdub at Vancouver Studios, and it turned out to be on her record, and that's the first time I had met her, and I loved the music. I thought, oh, this is great. This is beautiful singer-songwriter music. I kind of said, I'd like to be your drummer. And she was like, oh, well, we haven't really put the band together. And she was kind of involved in that Barney Bentall camp. So I sort of figured, like, I probably don't have a real good chance. And Barney will probably get some of his people to put a band together. I don't really know that camp of people. Anyway, I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell her, I want to be your drummer. I think I should be your drummer.
Right.
So we got together in a rehearsal studio and played and just clicked. And then I joined her band, and we did a whole bunch of Canadian touring. And actually, I had met Sarah previously when I was touring with Lava Hay in Montreal. We were playing in Montreal, and Sarah was working on her second record there in Montreal, and she was about to come back to Vancouver to sort of finish the record.
Mm-hmm.
She came out and saw us play. She really liked my playing and said, hey, when you're back in Vancouver, will you come and, play on a few songs on my record? I had no idea who she was, because she'd only had one record out in Canada at that point.
Right.
And I hadn't been in Canada for the last 5 years.
Right.
So I didn't really know musically what was going on up here. So came back to when we got back off that tour, did a lot of work with May Moore, a lot of touring, a bunch of recording, and then it came time to do some recording with Sarah and her producer, Pierre Marchand. He came out here, and it was one of my earliest experiences of being in the studio, and very inexperienced in the studio.
Okay.
So much that I got fired off the session.
Really?
Yeah. So it was a very interesting dynamic in that Pierre, the producer, who's one of the greatest producers, who's taught me so much in my time playing. He's one of my closest friends. It was kind of early in his career, and he didn't really have great communication skills. So
okay.
He had a hard time telling you what he wanted. You'd finish a take and he'd just leave the room, and you didn't know if you did a good job. You didn't know if you did a bad job. You just didn't know.
Okay.
And
nice.
I was very inexperienced still, in terms of being in the studio, getting good drum sounds, coming up with, and Sarah's music has never been meat and potatoes drums. It's always been something very different. Let's experiment, find different, interesting grooves. So that was my sort of first taste of not being able to come up with something interesting enough for the producer.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
And Paul Brennan, do you know Paul Brennan? Have you heard of Paul Brennan?
I know the name from somewhere.
Yeah, Paul was the original drummer in the Odds here in Vancouver.
Okay, yeah.
Paul now lives in Toronto. Unbelievably fantastic drummer. Paul was another one of those Vancouver drummers who was very busy here at that time.
Okay.
So after failing in the studio on that session with Sarah for a week, Pierre comes up to me. I think it's best that we get a different drummer. And I said to him, I totally understand.
Right.
So he ended up hiring Paul for a couple of songs. I ended up playing a couple of songs, getting a couple of songs on that record, and then Paul played. And then getting fired off the session, I was very, very, very devastated. And it was very much like, okay, you punk, just because you went to music school doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Now you're in this real situation of being in a recording studio, and the studio can be it is a very intimidating environment. Everything is microscopic. You hear every nuance and of everything you play.
Right.
And it needs to be in time, and it needs to groove, and it needs to sound great, and it needs to feel great. And that only comes with experience.
Right.
But after that, only a couple of weeks later, Sarah called me and she said, look, that was what it was. I really want you to join my band. I was just like, oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was kind of like, oh boy, back to the drawing board for me. When the word gets out that I've shit the bed on this recording session, those are the things you think about.
Yeah, absolutely you do.
And it was a studio full of musicians. She was there, her manager was there, the producer was there, the engineer was there. So, you're delicately embarrassed in front of all these people. And you're just like, oh my God, how will I ever work in this town again?
Oh no.
Anyway, a couple of weeks later, she called me and said, I still want you in my band. And then it began.
Yeah, no kidding. So
and that's how it began.
That was early 90s then.
Early 90s, yeah, 90s, mid 90s.
94, 95, yeah.
Well, 91 is when the second record came out. That's when I guess joined her band.
Okay, so yeah, like early 90s.
Yeah, beginning of the 90s.
Wow. So then that was, you said 25 years you played with her.
Yeah, 25-ish. I mean, I've still worked on her records. She hasn't done a lot of live touring in the last couple of years, and there's been a bunch of different drummers since I stopped, since the Big Bang happened, as we call it. But I've continued to record with her.
Yeah.
And we did a thing for Canada Day last summer for CBC where it was literally one song,
right,
that we recorded live downtown. So whether there's an opportunity to play live with her again, it's entirely up to her. I would do it in a second. We've had a very, very big life together. We love each other dearly. We have 2 children. We have so much history. And I've recorded with her since. We have this beautiful studio that we built. So who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's such an interesting dynamic, your relationship with her. And I sent you that text the other day. It was like, is there anything that you'd rather not talk about on the thing? I'm interested in that because of how close you were for so long, and then married, and then not married but still working together, and you have kids, and you have the studio, and I'm not I don't really have any pointed questions. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's just like, wow, what an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I never took advantage of the fact that I was married to her. Mm-hmm. I always, if you look back on any of the music we've made, any of the live touring that we've done, I took it very, very seriously. I took my gig very, very, very seriously. And that's what made Sarah's live thing so special, is because it wasn't just, when you have a group of, as much of a band as it could be, it was. Mm-hmm. It's a solo artist who hires, a lot of the people in Sarah's band have played with her for a long time. And there's a reason for that, because those connections are deep. Mm-hmm. And, Sarah allowed her musicians to get into the fiber of her music. And I was lucky to be involved in so many of the recordings and that recording process of being. Sarah historically spent years making records.
Right.
She was never told by the record company, you need to finish the record by this date. And she never wanted to make records like that. So we experimented for a long time, and I got to be a part of that experimentation for years and years and years and years. It's why we built this studio.
Right.
We wanted to have the ability to record when we wanted to record and when we were inspired to record. And we were very fortunate that we didn't have to go into commercial recording studios where you're under the gun. I mean, in the early days, you know, her first record, her second record, those were made in commercial recording studios. The process of her second record, when she met Pierre Marchand and he had his home studio in Montreal, residential studio, that's where I sort of got the idea. It's like, oh yeah, if you have your own place, listen, every musician wants that, to have their own place to work.
Yeah.
Right. When you're inspired to work, you go downstairs, you turn on your gear, you record. Even if it's for half an hour, you're inspired, you get the idea down. That's the dream for any musician.
Absolutely.
Now with technology the way it is, that you can make records on your laptop in your apartment. You know, look at Billie Eilish's last two records. They're made it with Phineas on a laptop and a microphone.
Yeah.
Right. You can do it. There's something to be said about maybe you shouldn't do it. That's a whole other discussion. But to have your own recording space. So I got to be very, very, very involved in the making of many of Sarah's records.
Right.
You know, I was her drummer for 7 years before we fell in love.
Right.
And then when we fell in love and continued to, you know, work together, it was always her thing and her music, and I supported it. I was her partner, but I didn't interfere in sort of the journey that was hers to make the kind of records that she wanted to make and work with. I mean, there was times where it's like, yeah, we should get Jerry Marotta to play on this. He's going to be better on this song. So Jerry became friends, and Jerry played on some of, you know, Afterglow and some of Surfacing. And it was never that, oh, just because I'm married to you now that I'm your drummer and I'm your drummer.
Yeah.
Now that was what happened when we went live and on tour. And that was great. And it made sense. And I always worked very hard to not get complacent with my role in the band. And when and anybody who's seen Sarah live shows or live tours, pretty fantastic, incredible band, and incredible show. And when you have a great singer and a great artist, and all the energy on stage is going direct, it just makes for great.
Yeah.
It just makes for great music.
It sure does. We were geeking out. A friend and I, he sent me a text actually the other day. It was like, oh no, we have these like little Zoom hangs every once in a while with a band that I used to be in. We're all still friends and everything. It's just the band kind of, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, he brought up a tune from Surfacing the other day. He was like, guys, have you heard this? I'm like, yeah, man, I have. And then we went down the rabbit hole of like watching live videos from Mirrorball.
Oh, beautiful.
Mirrorball tour. That was phenomenal. That show, I mean, that whole tour, I guess, was 2.5 years long, I think is what.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Mirrorball campaign, I mean, the sort of the Surfacing campaign, because of Lilith Fair being over three summers, we basically toured that record for 3 years.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And it shows in that live performance. It's just like you said, the band is just so incredibly tight and focused. Great band, great musicians, great dear friends, and we'd worked together for so long, you know. And when you play that much music together, that much, you just refine. And we were always, you know, we'd listen to board tapes every night after the show. We were all very critical of each other. Yeah,
always. I love board tapes. It's the greatest thing ever to listen back and go and think that you came off stage and it was a great show, and you listen like, what is going on with the time or this? And it's great. Though, you know, listening to board tapes is the greatest thing to improve your, you know, your playing and your, in terms of your dynamics on stage. You know, are you too loud? Are you too quiet? I mean, board tapes are the best.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a very, I don't know how to put it. I mean, the people that know me, they know that I can be very, not brash, but just kind of like
direct,
forceful and direct, and almost to the point of, causing them stress.
Yeah.
But that to me, the board tape thing and like being a perfectionist musically,
Yeah.
it can be a little much coming from me, and I get that. But that to me as well that's huge. If you're not studying
Yes.
what you're doing
Yes.
every time you do it,
Yeah.
then I mean, especially, and I hate to say it, because like it's like music is it's a commodity, and you have to have it. It has to be at a certain level to be able to,
Absolutely
move things forward. And
agreed. I was when I first joined Sarah's band, I was very, very, very relentless on the guitar player. And I look back at it now, and it was, and he was a very iconic Vancouver guitar player who I mean, deserves all his accolades, but he had terrible time.
Right.
And playing, and he didn't, I don't think he played on Sarah's record, but he had to, reproduce Bill Dillon, who is this iconic guitar player from Hamilton. Pierre Marchand has sort of always used Bill on all of Sarah's records. Anyway, so this guitar player had to recreate a lot of this stuff live.
Right.
And the timing of that stuff was very much in time. Like,
yeah.
And I was a dick. When I think back on it now, myself and the keyboard player, who's David Kershaw, who's one of my closest friends, we were very, very, very relentless on the board tapes and pointing out and signaling out constantly, your time is all over the place. You're not doing this. And it just wouldn't get better, and it wouldn't get better. Anyway, he did get fired.
Right.
It probably could have been handled a lot better now that I'm a little more older and mature. But at that time, I was relentless.
Right.
About that. And that was that classic example. Like, here's the board tape. It doesn't lie. We can all hear what's going on here.
Yeah.
It
doesn't take. Yeah. I mean, you can't say anything more about it, because
I know. And the idea of, recording shows, comment, tearing apart myself, tearing apart my own playing, critiquing myself. You do it, and then you make the changes, and you can considerably hear it getting better and better. It's like, oh yeah, that all made sense, because now this thing sounds the way it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
And we were very much, we were actually trying to recreate the record.
Right.
As much as we could. It was very much that the Neil Peart approach to playing the same every single night.
Right.
And not that you would play the same fills every night, but there was an intention to your playing. You were hitting that cymbal at that time, that specific cymbal, for a reason, because sonically it just, it made sense. So
right.
We always were trying to almost recreate the record at times.
Right.
And I loved doing that because it was a huge challenge.
Absolutely.
It was a huge challenge.
Well, and that's what people expect. I mean, that's what people want to hear when they go to see a show, for the most part, unless.
Yeah. And Sarah's show can be the quietest of quiets. We never got really loud, but some of the rock songs did get loud, but there was that huge dynamic of, anybody can play loud.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few who can groove very quietly. One of the great things that Sarah's lighting director always said to me, he goes, Ash, anybody can make it bright. Her show's very dark.
Yeah.
At times they were very dark. And I mean, visually.
Yeah,
because
totally.
when the music came down, we wanted to, and when we had to make the transition from theaters to arenas, it was not easy, because her music, it's not really meant for an arena.
Mm-hmm.
We did, because, the economics of playing in an arena versus playing in a theater for 4 or 5 nights, it's night and day. But
right.
Playing theaters, there's nothing like it. You can control everything.
Right.
I loved it, because it really, really, really got my dynamics of playing really together, because I loved being able to groove really quietly. And it's something I've always worked on really hard.
Right. That is challenging.
It's really challenging. Even to this day, when we're recording here in the studio, and you come up with something and it just sounds great when you're playing it kind of quietly and you let the microphones and the compression do all the work. And it's a great feeling when you get it on tape. But it's not easy to do. I still struggle with it because anybody can sit and play and yeah, that's great, sounds great, record it. But to do it quietly with intention, Keltner was great at that. Porcaro was great at that. Carlos Vega was great at that.
Oh yeah.
JR is great at that. Gad was great at that. Gad doesn't play loud. You see him these days play, he's not hitting hard at all.
We had tickets to see James Taylor. He was supposed to be back through in September. But we saw him 4 years ago.
I saw the same tour.
Oh my God.
I know.
It was, we were like row 10 and right in front of the stage left hang. So we should have been getting just blasted, but it was like sitting and listening to a good record in your living room. And
there's nothing like it.
Steve's playing his hi-hat like this and it's like,
it was years and years and years of experience, man.
No kidding. I mean, my first instinct, if I was playing in arenas, would be like, fuck yeah, here it is, but he's just like, it was a masterclass.
Yeah, you're relying, Sarah had the greatest front of house engineer for 20 plus years. And he and I would work together all the time really closely. In terms, we would sit down, he's like, you're playing it almost a little too quiet. It's like, I can't. I'm like, okay, no. And then I would sometimes videotape myself. I put a video camera on the side of the stage just to record just to watch myself. I'm like, because when you're we sort of, in our early days of touring, it was floor monitors, and then we were kind of part of that wave of graduating to the in-ears thing, which was not an easy transition,
right? Especially
for a drummer. Right. Especially for a drummer, where you rely on that, the air coming out of the monitors and the air coming out of a sub, and all of a sudden you're going to give me my sounds in my ears this big. Mm-hmm. It was a real struggle with me, and I remember when we first started using in-ears, I had to lock myself away in our rehearsal space and really figure out how to get the dynamics thing together.
Yeah,
you think you're playing loud enough, and you're not. You think you're playing too quiet, and it was a challenge.
Right. I could see that for sure. I still strive. I wear in-ears all the time for all the stuff that pop country stuff, click tracks, and blah blah blah. But it's a struggle, and I hear drummers talk about, I have them like so quiet that I can still hear my drums and just like, kind of fill it in with instruments. But I love hearing like a CD in my head,
right?
Everything panned out and loud and awesome. But that's so detrimental to playing.
It's working with a great monitor engineer also. And these days, the technology of in-ears, it's like leaps and bounds what they can reproduce. And there's mics in the in-ears that are picking up your kit, and it's pretty, you can dial things in pretty great these days,
right?
But it took me a long time. Even other band members struggle with it. Guitar players who need to have that amp behind them. I mean, I get it. I totally get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everything was, all the amps were under the stage kind of thing on those tours, and it
evolved into that sort of as the room, like playing theaters, amps were either in cases or behind the stage,
right,
or baffled off. But we were never that loud on stage either. Mm-hmm. It did get to, the Afterglow tour was the first time I was behind plexiglass.
Oh.
And that was its own another whole set of things to it's just like, that's what my drums sound like to me coming out. That was a whole other thing. Yeah.
I bet. That's
but it sure made the mix sound better up front. And Gary would always build his entire mix around Sarah's voice.
Okay. Yeah.
The entire mix was built around her voice. And, as I guess the venues became a bit bigger, I probably did hit, because you had to hit a little harder. Mm-hmm. But then you've got cymbals bleeding into the vocal mics. And when there's 5 people on stage singing, for 80% of the show, that's a lot of vocal mics picking up So when we did the plexiglass thing, it was fine. It was like, yeah, this, we would hear, mixes of the show, and it's like, this sounds unreal,
Right.
because he could get those vocals up where they should be, and the drums were there, and you could hear them and you could feel them, but they didn't get in the way.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the plexiglass thing either, but the breaking point for me might have been seeing Toto a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And Shannon was behind plexiglass,
Yep.
and that might have been the best live mix I've ever heard in my entire life.
I saw that same tour.
Oh, yeah, right. We probably saw it in the same venue. We were probably there together.
Yeah, and again, lots of vocal mics on stage, right? Joseph and Luke and Paige, lots of vocal mics on stage. So
yeah, do you know any of those guys?
I know Luke. Yeah, I know Luke. I mean, I would say we're acquaintances. I don't know that well, but I've been fully, completely fascinated for my entire life that mid 70s, late 70s, 80s, 90s studio musician thing that will never happen again. I mean, you look in the back of Jeff's book and the back of Luke's book, the catalog of music that these guys made, it's mind-blowing. It
really is.
It's hard to get it's like, and when you hear Luke talk about it, sometimes we were doing 3 sessions a day. I had 3 rigs around town, and we were making, and even Luke says, he goes, half of the credits in the back of my book, I'm probably missing 50% still that I don't remember.
And it's not like 3 sessions a day, like just a session. It's like you're playing on like Steely Dan records. He wasn't on Steely Dan records, but like Boz Scaggs.
Yep.
It's like the heaviest of the heaviest music at the time, 3 times a day.
That era of music to me is, and the real studio musician, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
It's just I'm always completely in awe of the volume of work these guys did.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. And when we think about sort of the generation before, the Wrecking Crew, which wasn't necessarily credited on stuff that we don't know, but even that era where they were working so much.
Yeah. Speaking of, we were talking about I'd Hit That, and Hal Blaine was on one of the episodes, and he's talking about, I did a tracking session in the morning, and then I'd have a voiceover thing at lunch, and then do a tracking thing in the afternoon, and another voiceover thing, and another tracking session, and then I'd get in my Rolls Royce and like drive to my mansion in Beverly Hills. It's like, dude, guy's making like 10 grand a day.
I know,
on sessions. Like, what is?
I know.
It's hard. Yeah, you can't even fathom like working like that these days.
No, I mean, we've all, you're a different age than I am. We've all had our sort of different journeys of what work is to us and what work's like to us and how much work. But I'm constantly trying to put myself in their shoes. And I lived in LA in the late, I lived in LA from 85 to 90. So I could, and we could feel what was going on there, the amount of work that was happening, the amount of music that was, because of the players who would come and do guest, instruction classes. Everybody was working. There was so much work. The economics of the business, the record companies had budgets, like crazy budgets to, you could book out a studio for a month or 2 months, and there was cartage and there was catering, and they could bring in anyone who was getting paid double scale or triple scale. Money was not an issue.
Right.
Records were just made. This is what it's going to cost. Now, oh my God. I'll give you $100 if you can play on my song. Like, really? Okay, well, $100 is $100, and if you don't say yes, somebody else is going to get the work, and so you might as well work and keep busy. It's just the business has changed so much now.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's I often say that I wish I was born 20 years earlier to
me too.
catch a glimpse of it. Yeah, you too, but me too. So I wish I could have seen the 80s like you did, and I people that know me know that I'm like a Toto freak, and I think, and I'll fight to the death, but I think Toto is the best band of people. Like the band itself is the best band that ever was or will be in terms of, you know, the skill set that those guys had and the music that they played on and what they did for
Agreed. 100%
music.
I could not agree with you more.
It's astounding. So I have to ask you now then, hanging out with Jeff.
So Joe Porcaro was one of the teachers at PIT.
Mm-hmm.
And when I sort of finished with the drum program, I wanted to keep studying. And Joe gave private lessons. So I was doing the voice program at PIT, and I was still, I had access to still practice drums and use the entire facility. I became great friends with so many of the teachers and the administration. And I was one of the very first vocal students when they opened the vocal school. There was, I think, 8 or 9 of us, and I was one of them.
Okay.
But I wanted to keep studying drums and keep playing drums. So I started studying privately with Joe. Joe did private lessons in their home in Studio City. He turned his garage into, it was like a music room.
Right.
Filled with his percussion everywhere. A couple of drum sets, marimbas, timpanis, all world percussion. And photos of his sons all over the room. Playing live shots.
Right.
The most intimidating room to be in.
Yeah. So just for the couple of people that are a couple of people that are watching are both really good friends of mine. So Joe's sons, all 3 of them, were some of the heaviest players of all time. Steve Porcaro, keyboards, helped develop a bunch of synthesizers, wrote Human Nature for Michael Jackson.
Yep.
Mike Porcaro played bass for Toto and all kinds of other sessions. Yeah, and Jeff, Jeff is if you don't know Jeff Porcaro,
yep, you don't know nothing.
Nothing.
If you don't know Jeff, you don't know nothing.
Yeah, talking about turning on the radio and hearing a musician. I mean, anything from the 80s.
Sirius XM has, from May to October, they have Yacht Rock Radio.
Yeah.
When you listen to that, if you listen to it for an hour, you can at least hear Jeff twice.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
Yeah. Anything Michael McDonald.
You can hear Jeff or Michael McDonald.
Yeah, yeah.
You can hear Michael McDonald singing background on every record ever made. And it's probably Jeff on drums.
Yeah.
So I love when May comes around and Yacht Rock Radio is on all of them.
I am going to have to get Sirius XM just for that. Yeah. So in his garage then,
Joe had this garage that he turned into a music room, and my lesson was Saturday mornings at 10:30 a.m., 10:30 to 11:30ish, 11:45ish, and Jeff would always come around. Would often come around to hang with his parents, to see his parents, to bring his kids over, and Jeff would sometimes walk into the drum lesson.
Yikes!
And talk about crapping your pants.
Yeah.
Talk about crapping your pants. And Jeff was very funny with me because I'm an East Indian. So, Ash, you got to put the curry on the beat. You got to put a little bit of that curry on the beat. I'm like, yeah, Jeff, you're absolutely right. You got to put the curry on the beat. So he would come in once in a while. So I would say I wouldn't say he was not a friend, but we didn't necessarily hang out. I would go see him at the Potato Play all the time. There was a time there where Jeff was in town so much that you'd see him at the Potato playing all the time, or he'd play at my place. He'd pop over into the school. He was mentoring Kurt Biscara at that time because Kurt had finished PIT the year before me, maybe 2 years before me. And Kurt was getting into the, getting big time into the session scene in LA. And Jeff was mentoring him. Jeff had hired him to play on the Boss Gags record that Jeff was going to produce.
Wow.
Yeah. And Kirky B, I've known Kirky since PIT. We didn't really know each other at PIT because he'd graduated, but he'd come by sometimes, and everybody had heard about, Kurt Biscara. He graduated from PIT. Now he's a working, he was like a product of the school, and now he's a working studio musician.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jeff would come into the lessons sometimes. his deep voice and cool as fuck, cigarette hanging off his mouth.
Yeah.
And we'd see him at the Potato all the time, and so he would call me Ash. He knew my name, and I was just like, I'm so not worthy.
Yeah.
That you even know my name. But he found me interesting because I was, I was a dark skinned kid, and I was a drummer, and he used to tell me, the only other Indian guy I know is Ricky Fattar. And Ricky Fattar, you know who Ricky Fattar is. Been Bonnie Raitt's drummer for years.
Okay.
Session guy from the Bay Area. He was part of that era of studio musicians also, for sure.
Right.
But he was and he's actually South African. He's not Indian, he's South African. But anyway, so, Jeff would come into the lesson, he'd poke his head, hey, Ash. And it's like, I felt like such a fool because I was just, I felt like I was in the presence of, and even back then, because of the amount of work he had already done and his name, and it's like, I think this is kind of what I strive. At that time, I didn't know what kind of drummer I wanted to be.
Right.
I just knew I wanted to be a drummer. Are you going to be a studio drummer? Are you going to be live? What kind of music do you want to play? Do you want to play heavy music? You're still trying to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
But Jeff was, on this mantle, right? He was on this mantle of
he did everything,
of one of the greats.
Yeah.
Who literally did do everything. My last drum lesson with Joe, I was moving back to Canada, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, and I had a last lesson with Joe. And I think the lesson before, Jeff was like, Joe had told him, oh, Ash is going to be moving back to Canada. He goes, you're going to leave? I'm like, Jeff, I can't work here legally.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, really? And Jeff didn't understand that. He's like, what do you mean you can't work here? I said, well, I'm on a student visa. I legally can't work here in the US. They could fine me and kick me out of the country. He didn't understand how that worked.
Huh.
The next week, I came back for my last drum lesson, and Jeff pokes his head in, and he comes in with a Paiste cymbal bag, and he pulls out a 19-inch Paiste Signature Series full ride, brand new,
mm-hmm.
and he gave it to me as a gift. And they only made it that 1 year.
Oh, man.
Maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
And I still have it to this day. And it was a gift from him, when you go back to Canada, you're going to start your career. And I was just like, I didn't know what to say. I was just like, I think I probably was in tears, and I was just so thankful, so thankful. And I stayed in touch with his father.
Yeah.
For years and years and years. But yeah, Jeffrey, saw him play at the Potato, 3 feet away.
Ugh.
And then at one point, a bunch of us drummers, a bunch of the guys from PIT, we'd go see Jeff play and Vinny play and JR play. And Jeff would always ask us to sit in. And so he actually said to me one week, he goes, "You going to sit in next week?" I'm like, no fucking way.
No chance.
No way am I going to sit in next week. I'm fully not ready for that.
Oh,
he was always very encouraging and very supportive of, he knew drummers were coming to check him out. And, he was one of the kindest, most selfless human beings I've ever met. And I didn't know him that well, but he was so quick to up other musicians. He was always like, don't check me out. Check this guy out. You got to check this guy out. You got to check this guy out. That's what he was. He upped other people. Right. And that's what made him such a incredible human being. Now, when he passed away, we were on tour. We were in Sacramento, and we were driving. We played Sacramento, and we were going to be playing Seattle the next night. And my brother lives in Seattle. And so I called him in Sacramento, said, hey, we're going to probably pull into town tomorrow. And he goes, hey, have you heard of this drummer, Jeff Porcaro? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'm just watching MTV, and he died. And that was before we went on stage in Sacramento. And it was just like, it was fucking crushing.
Yeah.
And this is before social media, before the internet. It was like, so you turn on MTV in the hotel room and you see a little blurb of MTV, the Toto's founding member, Jeff Porcaro, passed away from, and I was just like, I remember that feeling of loss of somebody who's not your parent, not a family member, but just somebody who you've, put on this pedestal and got to almost touch a little bit,
Yeah.
and feel his presence and be in his aura. Yeah, it was heavy, really heavy.
No kidding. That's the the reading his book and reading Luke's book and stuff like that. It's that's the consensus is that he was just the nicest person ever.
Yeah.
But he also had that thing about him, like when he walked into a session, it was like,
there was an aura. There was an aura about him.
It was, and he just kind of commanded things in a way. It was just
he there was a confidence that he had that was sort of unexplainable. And he he could walk into a room and not say anything, and you knew this person. There was just this, or I just say Jeff had an aura about him that I don't think we will ever see again.
Yeah.
We will ever see again. I mean, when you think about the legacy of work, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean,
the volume of work, from like the 70s to late 70s, 80s into the 90s, you'll just never see that again.
No, I agree. I mean, I think the closest thing would be the Cats in Nashville, doing the country stuff.
Yeah.
Brent Mason,
Jerry Rowe, Chris McHugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be the closest. I got a question here from somebody.
Yeah.
Does it show up on your screen?
No.
No? It didn't pop up in the video feed?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what's going on there. This is Ryan, lives across the street. Ryan's one of the best guitar players in the country. He's
awesome.
He plays for Gord Bamford.
Oh, great.
Gord. So, do you feel that record companies took more artistic risks on signing bands in those years, referring to?
Absolutely, they did.
Back in the day.
Yeah, they had budgets to go make a whole bunch of records, knowing that 1 out of 20 of them was maybe going to do something.
Yeah.
For every 20 records that record labels made, maybe one would stick.
Right.
They had the budgets. A lot of the A&R guys would take their chances, and they were given the budgets to go make great records that nobody ever heard.
Right.
The artist development, in terms of labels, it's over. It's been over for some time. These days, labels, managers, agents, they won't touch you until they see that you've created a presence yourself, a social media presence, a Facebook presence, a like presence, how many streams. They won't even touch you until they've seen that you've done the work yourself. They won't take a chance. They just won't take a chance. The economics are not there anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've done some work in A&R yourself?
Yeah, I quietly did a bunch of A&R for Network, where singer-songwriters we would give them demo deals, little production deals, development deals. It was fun. I love doing it. You get sent thousands of cassette tapes or CDs, and you got to go through them. It's like, oh, so this is what they did. I'm like, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Boy, it was a lot of crap you got to sift through until you find something that's kind of sort of, oh, maybe this has something. I love the old school A&R guys, the John Kolodners, the Rick Rubins, the old record makers. We worked closely with Clive Davis because Clive, was part of Arista that Sarah eventually signed to. Okay. And Clive was one of those great old music men who had that ear. He had that ear. He had that vision. He there's a handful of them, and they're all we're going to lose all of them. But that's that old school music, man. There's something about them. They knew.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had many brushes with A&R people, but
it's an interesting breed of person.
Yeah. I when I graduated school out here, they had basically like an award at the end of your degree or something, and there were 12 universities across Canada, and each university could pick one student to get this award. You get a little bit of cash, but they also fly you to Toronto to visit SoCan, visit Universal Music.
Oh, amazing.
Meet and greet kind of. Yeah, it was really great. So
what was the award called?
This is called the Fred Surratt Award.
Okay.
And Fred, I think, did a lot for funding music and arts, and was fairly tied into Karis, I think.
Yep.
So like the Junos and stuff like that.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a whirlwind thing. I think I flew out on a Monday morning and was back by like Wednesday afternoon or something. But in that time period, we went to SoCan and met some people at SoCan, and then we went to Noble Street and met Gavin Brown, and kind of hung there a little bit. But then we went to Universal and met one of the A&R guys there. Oh no, I can't remember his name.
This is how many years ago?
This is 4 or 5 years ago now. 5 years now.
I'm trying to think who would have been the
Sean Marino.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know Sean?
No, of Sean.
Of Sean? Oh my God.
I know of Sean.
So whoever's watching now, Ashwin knows everybody.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. Anytime somebody comes up in the group chat, it's like, oh yeah. I
met a lot of people.
Yeah. Anyway, I hanging out with Sean, we chatted at Universal, and then that night there was like this private gathering on a rooftop private club in downtown Toronto. So that was just like, I was way out of my element there, but Gavin's there and Sean's there and all these kind of people are there, and I ended up having a few too many pops and
overserved.
Yeah, a little overserved, and started talking to Sean. And at the time, Sean was dealing with the Tragically Hip.
Okay.
While they were prepping for the last tour.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a June of 2016, and
yes, and
we got into talking about Gord and how he was doing, and he was going and dropping in on rehearsals and prepping for that whole thing. And I ended up, I think I might have choked up and cried a little bit in front of him, because I think like the Tragically Hip, they had a DVD called That Night in Toronto.
Yeah. That
I wore out in my parents' place. They had surround sound in the basement, and I would just juice it down there and watch Johnny play. And that was kind of like that was the beginning of my like, oh, I want to do that. I was in my mid-teens at the time, I think, but
yeah.
That was my brush with A&R, was with Sean, and I might have spoiled that one royally by
probably not
tearing up in front of this guy. But
Gavin, did you get to know Gavin at all?
A little bit. It was the same thing. We were on the rooftop thing, and I was just like, oh,
yeah,
Gavin. And we took a picture together. I'll send you the picture later because it's funny. He's kind of like posing like, who's this guy? It's like, wow.
I've known Gavin for 100 years.
Have you?
Awesome drummer. Awesome.
Oh man, yeah. I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
I had no idea. He play on some Great Big Sea stuff?
My God, Gavin's played on so much stuff.
Yeah.
He, as a producer now, he's, I think he's still producing. I know he's still producing, but yeah, Gavin, I met him sort of, early in my career when he was playing with Crash Vegas. Great guy. Great guy.
I think I might have accosted him about working with Bare Naked Ladies as well. Oh yeah. Because I'm a huge Bare Naked Ladies fan too.
Yeah.
And,
I got to connect you with Tyler, man. You should do one of these with Tyler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tyler's a blast. Tyler is on all the time.
I know. I would love that. And I almost want like somebody like yourself to be on the call with me just to like absorb some of that, because he's
so great.
Yeah, I love watching him talk about anything. Or play or yeah, man. What was I saying? I can't remember what I was talking about.
The question from Ryan, and then
and then we went down the rabbit hole of just A&R stuff is what we're talking about.
So I did a little bit of A&R for Network. I just sort of, that part of the business I've always been fascinated in. There was a time there where Sarah's manager thought that I should, you should really get into music management. I've learned so much, you've absorbed so much, but I don't have the patience. And I told Terry, I said, if I was a manager, Terry, I would probably tell my artists to go fuck themselves rather than because I've seen what managers have to do.
Yeah.
It's a 24/7 babysitting job,
Yep.
and some artists are high maintenance and some artists are no maintenance.
Right.
But if you're a music manager, it's a 24/7 job. And I knew I wouldn't have the discipline or the patience to deal with some of the shit you have to deal with as a manager. And I saw a lot of it.
Yeah, I believe that.
I saw a
Yeah.
lot of it with a lot of the artists network managed, the stuff that the artists would put them through. I was like, you are a better person than me to not tell your artists to go fuck themselves.
Seriously.
Am I allowed to swear on this? Sorry, I'd
Oh
probably.
yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry, I should have put that disclaimer up front. I can do one of these like banners. This
No, that's
stream
fine.
is rated 18A.
Yeah, there you go.
Do that. Yeah.
Boom.
So I can do. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah, it's going across the bottom. 18A.
Yeah. I don't know. Is that a rating or R? It should be rated R.
Adult RX. I don't know.
Whatever. Yeah. Oh, so yeah, talking about A&R, I think yeah, talking to Sean, it was clear that he was a very patient person. And we had like a meeting in one of the boardrooms at Universal with him and another A&R guy, and oh man, he was a big Canadian hip hop artist in the late 90s, early 2000s. But he'd recently become an A&R
Oh,
executive at Universal.
okay.
I can't remember, but yeah, it was clear that those guys, you could see the exhaustion in their eyes a little bit, but also they were just very, very patient and I think very discerning. They have that thing that you were talking about. They know what they're listening for, and
Yeah, I mean, some of them don't have a clue what they're doing.
Okay.
And I've met those guys, and I've been involved in it, and I've sat in boardrooms with them, and it's like, you don't have a fucking clue what you're talking about.
So how do they end up there then? Like what's who's making those decisions?
I mean, I guess at some point they had a little bit of a track record, and a history in the business. Some of them were musicians at one time who, it's such a strange. These days, I don't know so much if labels even need to have A&R people, because these days the A&R people are basically combing social media, just combing Spotify, looking at playlists, looking at some up and coming artist in Vancouver, how many streams, how much social media, how much activity do they have? Do we like this music? Is it right for our label? And then they go and maybe jump on it or show some interest in it.
Right.
Do you need A&R these days? I'm not so sure you do.
Right.
I mean, do you need record labels these days? If you're a major pop artist, maybe you do, but it's just the business has changed so much. The fact that we can do so much of this ourselves, if you put your own team together, you can do so much of it yourself. You have to know, as a musician these days, you have to know so much more about the business. And you see a lot of artists getting caught up in the business and forgetting to be musicians.
Right.
They're spending so much time on their laptop doing the business of the music that they forget that you kind of got to learn your craft also.
Yes.
And when you get them into the studio, you realize, they're not that good, because they haven't put in the 10,000 hours of learning how to sing properly. Not that you should be schooled, but even playing gigs in clubs, doing different gigs, playing with other people, putting the hours in.
Right. Yeah.
I don't care how many likes you have. I don't care how many followers you have. None of that I don't think is that real. If you can't get up on stage, sing the song, make me feel something as an audience member, bring me to tears or bring me to joy, you don't really have anything.
Yeah. I mean, that I agree 100%. And that kind of goes back to like the way things were in the 80s.
Yeah.
There's none of that social media, none of this, the kind of build up to something that isn't actually music or performing.
Well, there was no Pro Tools.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I wanted to talk to you about that too, because I read a Sound on Sound article yesterday about surfacing,
Yeah.
and recording that with Pierre. And was that all done on Radar?
Radar.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, all done on Radar with limited editing capabilities. I mean, no, you could edit, you could go between takes, you could move audio, but
Mm-hmm.
it was very late. But yeah, we recorded to Radar.
That's
Um,
incredible
yeah, and
to
sounded
me.
incredible, and sounded incredible also.
That's what I've heard. And it, working at Session Wire, a couple of the guys at Session Wire had a pretty good hand in developing Radar back in the day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, talking to those guys, particularly Robin, our founder, he keeps saying how awesome Radar sounded, and
Yeah.
that if I can get my hands on one, I should buy it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of been going down that rabbit hole of looking at, old 8-track tape machines to run,
okay.
To leave in the corner, and you keep it and record, and you run your, run some sound through it. I don't know these days in terms of how we listen to music. Everyone's listening to music on their earbuds,
Yeah.
right? We're listening to music we're listening to music on our laptops or on our phones. So that hi-fi thing, which I still believe in. I still believe in getting great, 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 great sounds in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
But when we finish mixing something in this studio, we send it back to the Apple speaker and then email it to myself, and I listen to it on my phone. It's like, how does it sound here?
Yeah.
If you can hear everything here, so there's something to be said about that. But yeah, Radar, it was awesome. Pierre Marchand, Sarah's producers, he had 2 Radar machines.
Right.
And I got to learn a little bit how to use it. It was great technology.
Interesting. Then that process making that record too. You said you spent a lot of time experimenting leading up to that. But I understand that you recorded that record at his studio.
That was mostly Montreal.
Mostly, and
Yeah,
his studio concept was
it was a house. It was a house that was an A-frame.
Yeah, and there was no control room, right? It was like a console in the middle of the room.
Console in the middle of the room. Drums were over on one end of the console. Grand piano was over here. There was an isolation room for all the for the Radar, because
okay.
And the ADATs and the DAT machines, so you could close that room off.
Yeah.
But then all the guitars, all the mics, and that was the concept when we built this room. Is I want everything to be in the same room. I liked that when I was sitting at the drums, Pierre was right beside me. We had headphones on. He could kind of signal to me. I'd look at him. He would sometimes come and dance around the drum kit to inspire me. But that glass, so I haven't had a lot of experience with the glass, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Other than working at the warehouse or the armory here, where there's a dedicated room where the console is and a dedicated live room. I like that we could take the headphones off, we could stop, we could talk, we could put them back on, we could record again. It was that fast.
Right.
And I really learned that by working with Pierre for years and years and years, and he could be a little bit abrasive at times. We would stop. He's like, you need a break? You need to go for a walk or something? I'm like, no, Pierre, we're good. Let's go. Headphones back on. You get right down to it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's why we built this studio the same way. Everything's in the same room. Okay. We have an ISO booth if we really want to get a small drum sound, or for vocals or guitar amps really loud. Okay. We do all the vocals usually actually in there. But I like the idea of everything being in the same room.
Yeah, I dig that too. We had a video series I started a couple of years ago called Musicians in Basements Drinking Coffee.
Great. Brilliant.
Clever, right? Yeah.
Clever.
But the whole premise was there's 4 of us. We're all really good friends, and we played together in different configurations and everything. But the 4 of us we'd ask a guest to come and sit in, and in this room we would write and arrange and produce and record 3 pieces of music in 4 hours.
Amazing. And
film it all and everything, and we never wore headphones or in-ears or anything. It was all just And reading that article yesterday, I was like, that works. That's why it felt so comfortable to do all of this stuff, is that communication thing.
Yeah.
And it was a really good reminder of that. And that record sounds incredible. Surfacing, it sounds amazing. And I think I read that he doesn't like printing EQ or compression.
Not really.
In the process either.
not really.
That's messed up.
Yeah, I mean, Pierre probably lost a lot of years on his life making that record. We all worked very, very hard on it. He worked very, 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 very hard on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great, 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 great experience. Lots of experimenting, lots of, not necessarily lots of takes, but lots of experimenting, like going far left, only to maybe come back to, oh, well, maybe it should just be what it, some of those songs are, I guess you could say, straight ahead. But there's a lot of them where we really went down, different roads. And when you have your own home studio, you have the ability to experiment for hours. It doesn't mean you should, but a lot of Sarah doesn't necessarily, write a song on piano, come up with the lyrics, the chords, and okay, now we're going to present it to the musicians to do all the parts. It's never usually like that. It's like, oh, I'm gonna roll a few loops, a few percussion loop ideas on this. Let's get this. Oh, let's put some drums on. Yeah, let's change. It was just we experimented so much, and she never songs were never really finished when we started sort of putting instruments on. Songs would evolve,
right?
And Pierre was always mixing as we went.
Okay.
It's something I do. You sort of you're committing, making decisions as you're recording, and yes, when you get to the end to mix it, you are still doing a final mix, but it's almost done.
Right.
So I always liked that process, that you're kind of mixing as you go. So it was never, Ash, come in on Monday, do the drums. We're going to do the guitars on Tuesday, the bass on Wednesday, the background vocals on Thursday, and it was never, ever that. We would jump between songs. We'd go revisit a song a year later sometimes. The freedom to work that way is a good thing and a bad thing, in that it took a very, very long time. But in the end, it made for a great, great, great album.
Yeah, I'll say.
However you get there, and these days, the fact that you can make a record on a laptop, and you can take your laptop with you, and you can go to your friend's house and maybe record some guitar, and now I'm going to go home and work on it a bit, and now I'm going to put some drums. And I love what technology, that part of technology is fantastic. These days, unfortunately, and I know this for a fact because I've been involved in it, the cut and paste technology, the cut and edit. I worked on Sarah's last record, and we did some of it in the studio, the record that Bob Rock did a bunch of.
Okay.
I think he did it, most of it. And we put some drums in the small room, and I'd finished a couple of takes, and I wasn't out of that room for 20 seconds where his engineer's cutting every kick and snare. Everything.
Right.
It's certainly not my place to say you should or should not do that, but it was so automatic for them.
Right.
Right. And I know that happens in Nashville too.
Yeah. However,
we're great drum take. Let's cut.
Right. However, it's funny you should mention that. Like, Shannon Forrest.
Yep.
Is hilarious in that he's so against editing and gridding everything. I heard a story from somebody in Vancouver. He's a musician in Vancouver. He was like down in Nashville watching a record being tracked, and Shannon was playing. And I think like Shannon finished a take, and they pulled the tracks, and the producer was on his laptop in the back corner, started gridding the drums, and Shannon walked by and he said,
"Yep,
are you doing what I think you're fucking doing right now? Better not. Don't fucking touch my drums." It's like kind of one of those kind of things. So I do think that there's there you can say that kind of stuff. You might not get hired for the next session.
Yeah, but I actually don't think it's our place to say it.
Okay.
Once you've done your take, it's out of your hands.
Oh yeah. No, right.
It's out of your hands. And these days, it's all about recording yourself and firing off tracks to somebody across the world. And after that, it's kind of out of your hands.
True.
But just because you can edit and can cut everything to grid doesn't mean you should. Now, a lot of the music that I get sent to me here to play drums on, there is usually 95% of the time, there is some pre-recorded rhythm track, percussion loop, drum track, low-end rhythmic thing. And I often find that when you get tracks like that, all that stuff is going to end up in the final mix. So they will cut the drums. Otherwise, you get crazy, crazy problems with flamming.
Absolutely, yeah.
Having said that, go listen to the isolated Beat It drum tracks of Jeff playing along with Michael slamming on the floorboards. You can hear it flam like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But when you hear it on the radio, when you hear the final mix, you can't hear any of the flamming. But I remember when somebody sent me those isolated tracks, and I was like, this is flamming insanity, because it's before any kind of editing.
Yeah.
And there's Jeff playing along with, you know, the pre-recorded Lynn track. And I was like, whoa, because that was the reality back then. You're playing along to a drum machine. There's no editing it.
No. You
can roll off the low end so you don't hear flamming in the low end. But these days, most of the stuff that gets sent to me, there's already pre-recorded rhythm stuff.
Okay.
And so I know that that's probably going to end up in the final mix. I play as tight as you can, as close as you can. I send it off. Sometimes they'll actually ask me to edit it.
Yeah.
Can you cut some of this? I'm like, well, I'm not going to cut it myself. I said, I work with a great engineer who I've worked with for 25 years. He'll cut it. And he does it in such a way where you kind of, it's like, oh, this still sounds, you don't have to cut every kick and snare.
That's exactly it.
Every hi-hat. It's just like, just program it if that's what you want.
Yeah, and that's Brennan, just commented here. There's a way to edit and to keep the groove and the feel of the musician, but tightening it up. And that's exactly.
Absolutely.
And Absolutely. I do that too. If I track something and send it to somebody, I'll do that as well. But the whole like quantizing everything.
Yeah, it's gone too far. It's gone too far. We have no real control of it. I think and if somebody hires me to play drums on something and I send them off. It's out of my hands at that point.
Yeah.
They may sample replace, they may cut it. It's kind of out of my hands, It's so you can't get too attached. There's that story of Gord Downie working on, which is the record that I can't remember. I don't know, it's Phantom Power, and he walked into a room and they were tuning his vocals. And he just turned around and said, I can't be a part of this. And he just left. But it was one of those, I can't be a part of this.
Right.
And he just left.
Just let them do their thing.
Like, do your thing. I'm not going to say anything. I don't get that attached. I don't think these days you can get that attached. Someone hires you, you send them off. What you've done, it's out of your hands at that point.
For sure. I guess it's mildly insulting when it happens in front of your face. Or not insulting, but no, it's not insulting. At least for me, it's anxiety inducing a little bit. It's like, oh my God, I didn't.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you're not tight enough.
I know. You question your own. Of course, you're going to question your own playing.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like, but wait a minute. But they hired me, and then but then you find out that they do it for every record that they make.
Right.
I was going to say somebody's name and now I forgot. A way a lot of. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation, man. It's like, I don't want to get people in trouble. I know people who make records like that and they edit absolutely everything. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. There's just consequences, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. So what are you working on these days then?
Oh my God, vanity projects like everything else, finding other fellow musicians, sending files back and forth. I'm working on a project with Ken Harrison, who's my writing partner in Toronto. He was in a band called the Wild Strawberries. He's still in a band called the Wild Strawberries. And he and I are doing a lot of, we send a lot of music back and forth to each other, experimental stuff. That's sort of what I'm doing to keep busy these days. There's some friends of mine in LA who are going to send me some stuff to play on next week. Just trying to stay focused, trying to stay busy, trying to be creative, not looking at the music business too closely right now because it's terrifying to me what's happening. The
Yeah.
decimation of our business, and I'm seeing fellow musicians' careers go end,
Right.
because that sort of, a lot of those musicians who made records who can't tour, it's just they're devastated.
Yeah.
The live music thing will come back. It's going to take a long time for it to come back.
Yeah.
In terms of gathering, arenas and things like that will be the last things to fill. Small theaters, small clubs, I think you'll see that happen a lot sooner. But man, it's strange times.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we can only hope that the vaccine rollout happens a little quicker.
Yeah, we're a little behind in this country, but I do think when it does come back, it will be gangbusters. But I also know there's a backlog of tours that have been, a good friend of mine works for Live Nation, and he told me, if you were an artist today looking to book a room or a tour, he goes, we can't find you a room till 2023 because of the backlog of, the major tours, the B-level artists, everything's been pushed back every 3 months, gets pushed back. So if you made a record now, I'm not sure you should put it out, because if you cannot promote it properly, and playing live is the biggest driver of musicians' income these days, it's like, put it out or wait.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of records that have come out in the last year that have come and gone.
Yeah, that's true.
They've just come and gone.
Yeah, that's very true.
And whether those artists, when the touring does come, it's so strange, the whole thing, because the cycle has been so broken now. Because there was such a cycle, right? You make a great record, you go work it for a couple of years, you make another one, it gets, that building of a career. It's certainly changed.
Yeah, it's quite terrifying. I mean, don't want to think about it too much.
Yeah. Stay focused, stay creative, work. We're in this world where we can share files with our musician friends all over the world. Find people to do that with. I'm doing it all the time. It keeps you in it.
Yeah.
It keeps you. It's never going to be the way it was. Keeps you in it.
Yeah, and start group chats with friends talking about drums
daily. Go down the snare drum rabbit hole and never come out.
Oh my god. Well, I feel like this is a good kind of note to end the live stream portion.
Okay.
So I'm gonna hit the end broadcast button soon, but you're gonna hang around for a few minutes after.
Absolutely.
I hope.
You bet.
Yeah, for anybody that's watching, thanks for checking out another Friday Drum Hang. Hopefully going to be a weekly thing, regardless of whether or not I have anybody hanging out with me. You can hang out with me.
Yeah.
I'm planning on digging up a Rosanna cover that I did this time last year. Just digging up the session. Yeah.
And you played?
I played there's a drumless track.
Wow.
You can, like, the actual session, but without Jeff's drums, and you can. So I went on a deep dive. I think Ben Bradley. Do you know Ben?
I know. No, I don't know Ben.
He's a fantastic drummer. Played for Brett Kissel for a while, and he challenged me to do Rosanna. So I went on a deep dive and read about the microphones and the drums and tuning and
deep.
Yeah, and tried to mix it so it sounded exactly like the record. So I'm gonna open that session next Friday and kind of.
Paul Jameson just sold that drum set.
Yeah, thanks for sending me that link. That's
he owned that drum set, and he just sold it to some ridiculous collector somewhere, I think in LA, for a lot of money.
50 grand or something.
That Yamaha prototype pre 9000 series with the long lugs. There's videos of Jeff playing that online. That kid.
Man, that's something we didn't really talk about today, but maybe I'll have you back on another time. We can talk more about that. We'll talk about it just between us, but
yeah.
Dang. Yeah.
Dang. Did you transcribe it first, or did you just sort of do it by ear?
No, I did. Yeah, I wrote it out.
Oh man,
And
good for you. I'd
yeah,
love I'd love to see that transcription. Love to see it.
yeah. I'll send it to you. I put it in the computer and stuff, and because you can find the drumless stem, or the drum stem as well,
Right.
and you can hear exactly what he's doing, and it's surprising how sparse the ghost notes are in the first part of that tune. He's not playing the ghost notes in that groove for the first part of the tune.
No, and you know what's so funny is if you ever, I'm not a big social media person, but sometimes I will go down the Instagram drummer, and when you watch a lot of these guys playing that beat, it's like, guys, you need to dial back the ghost notes by about 1,000.
Yeah.
Because he's actually not playing that many.
No, and they kind of sneak in
Yeah.
towards, that first chorus kind of thing, and then after that he's playing more of the ghost notes, and
Yeah.
so going down that rabbit hole was interesting. Transcribe it, and then
Cool, man. Good for you. Yeah. I always said transcribing your favorite drum tracks is one of the best learning tools when you can actually see it, and then you're like, oh, this is how he does it. It's
Absolutely.
a great. We used to do that at PIT all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I knew how to play it before that.
Yep.
And I knew the parts and everything, but working out the sticking for the fill going into the chorus too was yeah, right, left down the top. It's like, okay, I get it now.
Cool.
Yeah, watch some videos and figured that out, and then
awesome. Good for you. Man, I want to see that transcription. I'm gonna put it up here and spend all day.
Oh man, and thank goodness my wife is as patient as she was, because that was like 2 or 3 weeks of me just like,
I bet,
really trying to get it to sound like Jeff, which is obviously not possible.
So you went down microphones. You obviously are using your own drums. What did you use for a snare drum? Like, I mean, it's a dead sounding snare. It's probably a Radio King. I mean,
yeah.
Probably one of his 6.5 by 14 Jameson Radio Kings.
Exactly. And the video I put together and put on YouTube, there's like it's 10 minutes long, and the first half is like talking about all the stuff that I've kind of came up with.
I got to watch that right away.
It was a 6.5 Radio King apparently, and he liked to use like the big metal weight part from a tape machine. I don't remember what it was called, but they would just like tape it to the drum, and so I didn't do that, but I had to. I used a Superphonic, like a 78 Superphonic instead. It's shallower, but kind of got it to sound that dead. And then I had, the 10, 12, 13, 16. That's the most fun I've had playing on a drum kit with that many toms in that configuration. I can totally see why he would want to do that.
Yeah,
so comfy.
When I left PIT and I bought my first sort of professional DW drum set, I bought those exact sizes. I had that exact setup. It's that thing. You worship your idols, right? You want to dress like them, and you're in that headspace. Oh, if I get these drums and I get these cymbals, I'm gonna sound like him.
Yeah. No.
It's so funny. Hey? It's so funny.
Yeah, it was quite the experiment. Ryan across the street says, "I can hear you across the street," and it's probably true.
We need to spend a drum hang talking Jeff for 3 hours.
Yeah, I would love that. Whether or not it's broadcast to the world, I don't
care. The world doesn't.
No, but for sure, and I'll send you that link.
Thank you.
But I'm gonna end the broadcast here. So
awesome.
anybody that wants to tune in next week, 11 a.m. MST or 10 a.m. PST, I'll be cracking that session open again and seeing what happened. I'm
amazing.
A little worried about it, but we'll see.
Awesome.
So, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Ash, for hanging out, man.
Thank you, buddy. It's so good to see you.
And likewise, yeah. We'll talk.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, right after I end the broadcast, we'll talk.
Awesome. Okay. Ciao.